Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the House Committee on General and Housing. It is Wednesday, April 2nd, and we are hearing the introduction of two bills. The first is H 445, which is an act relating to creating land access and opportunity revolving fund. Today, we're just doing an introduction, and Representative Brian Chena is the sponsor, one of the sponsors of the bill, and is here to present it. Brian.
Yeah, what's the second bill? Not one I'm responsible for.
459, parental and family.
Okay, great. Just making sure because I didn't know that. There was two. So I'm gonna pull up the language, and I'm not gonna do a walkthrough because Ledge Council can do that if you wish. I'm gonna just look at the language to keep me grounded and give you a basic summary. It was 445, right?
Mhm.
So this is Representative Brian Chena. I think we're live, right? Okay, so this is Representative Brian Chena from Burlington. And I'm here to present on H 445. The title of this is an act relating to creating the Land Access and Opportunity Revolving Fund. That is not my desired title or intent of this bill. So I was frustrated, but I got it one day before the deadline and there was no changing it. It was supposed to be called something like an act relating to development and maintenance of affordable housing infrastructure. I had multiple titles, but the idea being that what I wanted was a bill that would show that we could recapture some revenue and reinvest it in a way so that we could address the housing crisis in a more holistic fashion by building the community's competency to develop and maintain housing for ourselves and not be so reliant on companies. Right now, we hear, that there's regulatory barriers, but there's also a workforce shortage. There's supply chain issues. There's like many factors, better than me probably, because you hear testimony all the time of what's holding up the development of housing. And also, many of these systems are not necessarily going to be sustainable in the long term if there is any kind of further escalation of what's happening nationally in terms of funding, in terms of partnership between states, in terms of trade, tariffs, et cetera. So also climate disasters and other crises like wars, et cetera, could threaten supply lines. And so I think we need to be thinking creatively about how do we invest in the local community's capacity around Vermont to build and maintain housing for ourselves. And so overall, it says here in the purpose of the bill that it's our intent to support the human right of housing and to promote public health and community safety during recovery from COVID-19 pandemic, the polysubstance pandemic, and climate disasters by preserving affordable housing and creating new social and economic opportunities for the development, maintenance of sustainable, resilient, and affordable housing infrastructure. So that's really that. I feel like that sentence does capture the spirit of the bill better than the title. Essentially in section 2, this isn't a walkthrough, but sort of high level summary. And if you don't like all these ideas, I ask you to cast aside the ones that are distasteful and focus on the ones that might be palatable, because I know everyone doesn't agree on how we should use taxation. But in this first section, I wanted to put right up front, here's a way to fund the investments, even though appropriations would make that decision and not you, honestly, because I know that's how it works. And it would be to create a income tax surcharge similar to what Governor Snelling and the legislature did when the state was in a financial crisis in the 90s for 5 years on those with the highest income of 1.5% on the amount above 500,000. The last time we ran these numbers with joint fiscal, they were 50 to 100 million a year. I don't know what it would be right now, but the idea here would be to take that money and reinvest it into the community over 5 years. And basically, the way Ledge Council wrote it was into this one fund that the LAOB would control. That's not what I originally conceived, but I accepted it because I was saying that a quarter should go to the taxpayers as a tax break for those 5 years, the regular property tax, like the general population, that a quarter of it should go into the reserves, and then that could be loaned out later or something, and then half would be invested. But this was a simple way for them to write the bill. So you're welcome to consider alternative ways or appropriations or ways and means of how to spend that money if we were to do a surcharge. And what I'd rather focus on today is just reviewing a list of the investments I'm talking about, see if you have any questions, and then my time's probably almost up. Oh yeah, and then Ledge Council did include a cleanup thing in this bill around the board membership, so I'm gonna skip that for now, but you may have already talked about that in other discussions, so, so here's the kinds of projects that and I guess what I would ask you today is, it's too late to pass this bill this year, and the housing bill is, you know, on its blessed journey through the Senate, and there may be bills coming back, that in this process, if there's ways to tack things on or nudge things to include these ideas, great. You know, like if you see it, if there's something that the committee likes and you see something, you say, you know, let's add some language to this section. It will allow this piece of that other bill to happen. That's what I would ask for at this point. Because I know that, you know, the ship has sailed. So here's some examples of those things. Here's some examples of the activities I'd like the LEOB to be empowered to, you know, to invest in. The purchase of buildings and lands by current tenants so that there's more owner-occupied affordable housing. The renovation of owner-occupied multi-unit housing. The development of affordable housing infrastructure for land that is owned through a residential cooperative or other form of collective ownership. The development of affordable transitional housing for members of historically marginalized communities, with a priority for projects that lead to collective ownership. Collective ownership is emphasized here because when people own something, they care for it more. When people own something, they take care of it. It means something to them when they're spending money to fix their own. I can say this from owning my own property. When you spend money to fix your own thing, it goes a lot more than when you're paying another person and then and you don't have that emotional investment. It also allows people to build equity. And if we did this right, we could lift generations out of poverty over time by allowing families who haven't had a chance to have a little bit of something to pass on to their kids. Bill also asked that we prioritize funding for projects that would create self-sufficient neighborhoods using intersectional and circular design. And so what this means is that as we're building these new communities and neighborhoods, we're building them so that there's localized waste management with compost, with solid waste, gaseous waste, liquid waste, instead of hauling waste to a landfill across the state and dumping the problem on someone else, finding ways to use those resources and embedding that into the infrastructure so it's easy for the people who live there. Regenerative agricultural practices that we could be building greenhouses and gardens into the infrastructure of the housing, and also independent energy generation. I was talking with this group that I'm going to meet with that makes turbines that can go in sewer pipes. And I want to learn more. That technology has been improving in terms of efficiency. And they're saying it may be possible at this point to have that in new developments and have it generate a significant. So I don't know. I want to see their proposal. But, you know, there's ways we could think about how do we generate that energy in the buildings. Also, the social and physical infrastructure to expand access to community resources like tool banks, labor pools, and workforce training programs. That we should be training the people in buildings like myself. I would go to classes on the weekend to learn skills to fix my own house. And maybe I'm learning about carpentry and maybe Representative Krasnow is about plumbing. And Representative Howard is learning about electric.
I mean, I'm in the wrong field. I'm making money.
Right. So then when my toilet is clogged or my septic system needs maintenance, Representative Krasnow helps. And when Representative Howard needs a window replaced, I help as the carpenter, and that we can create sort of this, I call it barn raising 2025, this idea of going back to a piece of our society that we've lost, which is neighbors helping neighbors and having this capacity locally to help each other.
Is it kind of like a work bank?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's all voluntary. And the bonus for businesses is they can advertise in it. They could say, we need extra help. And then if you want to make extra money on the weekend, you can take a job and help a developer build a house. Do you have a question?
I don't have a question, but while you're on this topic, I just wanted to say that at Castleton in Rutland in May, they are having a huge event. They have invited kids from all the schools, the guidance counselors have been notified just to promote the trades. And they're gonna have a huge number of businesses there. Hopefully they'll have equipment there. They said that they might, to do exactly what you're saying. Exactly. So I just wanted to get that in there, that little soundbite in there. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
I've got a question. So does this, taking a step back, does this change the essence of the LAOB?
No, this would be asking the LAOB to do additional work.
I got you.
Yeah, and so I think what I'd say is it'd be good to hear from the staff and from other board members at some point to hear about the capacity for that and how it fits into the existing work. So it's not asking the LAOB, in my opinion, to reinvent the wheel. It's saying like, once you get the wheel going, let's build a car together. You know, it's really like, it's the extension of the work. I just want to list the last things I didn't get to quickly, which is this idea of also, sorry, I'm trying to find the place again. Supporting members from historically marginalized communities, like people experiencing homelessness, substance use disorder, mental or physical disabilities, history of incarceration or involvement in justice system. And especially I'd like to highlight youth with a history of interaction with DCF, because most of the unhoused people will tell you they were in DCF custody. And the ones who weren't from Vermont were in CPS or whatever it was called. But most of them are from Vermont and the elderly. And I wanted to give you an example that in Finland, when I visited Finland, I met these kids at a bar at 3 a.m. The sun is up because it's Finland and it's summertime. We go to this apartment building to have a drink after the bar. And I'm hanging out with kids my age, between 20 and 30 at the time. And I'm like, this is a nice building. How much does it cost? And they're like, well, it depends on your job, on your age. Everyone pays a sliding scale as you get older. All youth 18 to 26 live here. And when you leave, you have an account to spend on a down payment on a home. And I'm like, what? Like, why don't we do that here? Especially for DCF kids who we dump to the streets. It could be made for them, but open to all kids. And that would attract young people to Vermont because they'd say, I could live in Vermont, work, and earn money to buy a house in Vermont. So just putting it out there as an example. So I'm not going to read every piece of the rest of the bill, but
We're almost out of time.
Yeah.
We're late, in fact, and have 2 more coming, so.
yeah. No, I'm not going to read the rest of the bill here because these other aspects were already mentioned in other pieces of it. So just in closing, I'd like to ask you to consider, these ideas in your work moving forward this year.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your
Thank you very
time.
much.
Thanks for coming. Our next bill,
Thank you.
come on up, Teddy. Our next bill is H 459, which for an introduction, this is an act relating to the Parental and Family Leave Act.
Number did you say it was?
H 459.
Thanks, Georgina.
No.
Thank you.
It's so nice when we have folks from other committees come in so we can spend more time with them.
Always happy.
Yeah.
Come on down from our,
Oh, I was talking about Brian. No, I'm just
Oh.
kidding.
well then, I hate to be
You've been
here.
here, you're old hat. Okay, go ahead, Teddy.
All right, hello folks, Teddy Wozniak, Berry City. H 459 is a short form bill introduced by myself and Rep. Connor Casey that aims to address a loophole, for lack of a better term. In talking to some folks in labor early on in the session, it was discovered that there have been employers that are, when an employee gets hurt at work, you fall down, you fall off the ladder, you break your arm. That's happened to my father, et cetera. You're supposed to be entitled to workman's comp. And we have learned that there have been employers that say, okay, we'll give you workman's comp, but first you're going to go on paid family leave. Then you're going to use up that time. Then you're going to use your PTO, and then you'll do workman's comp to bring down the amount of workman's comp that employers are being charged. It's not a widespread thing, but I've heard testimonies from 3 or 4 individuals that have been affected by this. And we all know that that was not the intention of paid family leave or of the original intent of workman's comp. So the language, well, actually, this is a short form. I do have draft actual legislative
You
language.
do have draft.
That I can send to the committee. I would suggest reaching out to, I can never remember his last name, Curtis from the Teamsters.
Oh, yeah,
Curtis Clough or Clough, good Irish name. And he has testimony from the affected individuals. So this is just sort of a thing I wanted to put on y'all's radar as you're working on various paid and unpaid leave issues, and suggest that if you're interested in pursuing this further, reaching out to Curtis to get him scheduled for some testimony. And like I said, I know that he's already collected some testimonials of folks who have had this happen to them.
How frequent is this?
I've heard of 4 instances.
Out of how? No idea.
I don't know.
Okay.
But I think per the, making sure that our legislation is having the intent that it does, plugging this loophole, I think would be,
Yeah.
Yeah.
frankly, I think it's more of a technical change or cleanup language than a policy choice. But I think that we want our different programs, whether it's workman's comp, paid or unpaid leave, PTO, to be used for the intention that those programs are designed.
Yeah.
So that's it. Just wanted to put it on your radar.
I'll just say thank you. Obviously, folks on this committee know that this is an area of interest to me, and often our job is to evaluate how things play out in our laws, and sometimes they need adjustments based on feedback. So it's definitely of interest to me. So thank you for bringing it to us.
Yes, of course. And again, just to be clear, I don't think that this is a particularly widespread problem, and I don't want to, cast assertions that we have bad actors amongst our wonderful business community here in Vermont.
But to one person who's dealing with it, it's a
Could make a
huge
huge
deal.
difference. Yeah. And like I said, my dad was a construction worker and he fell off a ladder and he broke his arm, which, affects your balance when you're walking. So then the next winter, it was a horrible injury. He was still recovering from that injury. And a year later, because his balance was still off, he fell and he broke his leg on the other side. And
Yeah.
fast forward 10 years and he's,
Yeah.
we joke that he's the $1 million man because he has more metal in his different parts of his body than not. But just to your point, I think I appreciate you raising that. Like, if this is a small thing that we can do to help even 4 people, I
Yeah.
think it's worth it.
Okay,
Oh,
any, yes.
Oh, I don't have a question, I'm more of a comment, but many years ago, I worked for a company and I did the workers' comp
Mm.
claims. And the company actually paid the employee before they even got, the paperwork was done with
Yep.
the state because they felt it was so important. And I hope that the cases that you know about that's all there is, because that doesn't seem right to me. I mean, really, no one should have to use all of their vacation and leave time when it's a work-related injury. So thank you for bringing this forward.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
You might have some work to do now.
I have to go back upstairs and fix education.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Our next event is at 11:30 when we're hearing Judith Dillon, who's the Executive Director of the Labor Relations Board. Let me ask you, would it be okay with you guys if I took 5 minutes to talk about the development process for a minute?
Yeah.
I just have noticed
Story time.
questions coming up that this is just, should be taken as my opinion, but I'm doing it on the record. If I wanted to develop, let's say, I wanted to build 3 duplexes, I would put together a proposal. And the proposal would have to have, how much would I get in rents? What it would cost me to build them, et cetera. And I would go to a bank. If I have a reputation already, like I've done development, I probably could get a loan. If I'd never done one, it would be harder. But the best I will do under any circumstances is get 50%. In other words, when you buy a house, if you buy a house, your standard mortgage is 80% and you can get more. That's really an artifact of the New Deal forward and all, it's really unusual in commercial real estate. Banks aren't usually interested in taking more risk than loaning 50%. And the reason is, remember, the bank's kind of Armageddon solution if you go bankrupt, and lots of development projects go bankrupt. You sort of have to be a little nuts to be a developer. But anyway, in terms of risk, the bank's ultimate solution, their first solution is you pay off their loan from the profits that you make on the development over time. Their other solution is if you go bankrupt, they take the apartment building, but they don't want to own the apartment building. Banks don't want to own anything. So they sell it as best they can. And they know that if you failed, chances are the market is soft and they're going to take a bath. So the way they protect themselves is by just loaning you less than the full market value of what you're going to build. So if they only loan you half, and they are first in line in terms of the creditors, they know that at least they'll probably get their money back. And since they lend you money at merely like 5%, 6%, 7%, even 8%, that's relatively low compared to what I, as the developer, might have to pay to get investors. I'll get back to that. So since banks do not make a lot of money on interest, they don't want to take any risk. And if you ever you want to know all the problems with something, look at the bank's contracts. They have every possible out they possibly can. It's just like insurance policies. Okay. So I might put a little of my own money in, but it doesn't matter whether it's mine or somebody else's. The next thing I do is I go looking for more money because the bank only put in 50%. So the question is, where's the other 50% coming from? And the answer is, it's coming from what's called equity. In other words, I look for investors. And frankly, developers often sit in a room just like this with about this many people who are interested, and they present who are investors, and they present the project to them. And they ask them if they would be willing to commit capital. And what the investors do, these are people who could invest their money in anything. And so what they do is they ask, how risky is this? And how much would I have to make in order to take the risk? And very often it's well north of 10%. It's just too risky. There's market risk, there's all kinds of regulatory risks, there's all kinds of risks. And for very big projects that I was involved in, the answer was often 18%. Okay? And so whatever it takes to get the capital is what you have to build into your spreadsheet. That's what you have to pay back. You have to pay back those equity investors. One of the key problems is if I'm a developer and let's say I do 3 developments over time, I have to incorporate each of those 3 developments separately. I don't own them. It's like development number 1, LLC owns the first one. Development number 2, LLC owns the second. Why is that? No one will lend money either as a bank or as a developer. No one will lend money to a project without doing their due diligence on that project. They are not interested in the other projects I've done or will do. They don't want to get into a situation where some other project goes south and the investors in that project sue to take the money out of this one because it's more successful. Their attitude is, I'm loaning you money on this project and it damn well better be just this project. So in order to do that, I create a limited liability corporation for that project, project number 1 LLC. And project number 1 LLC has to work out on its own. So what's on my spreadsheet? Well, all the expenses you can think of first building it and then operating it. The problem is in Vermont, what we're hearing, you guys have heard this. On the income side, the income is, what are people going to pay in rents or to buy it? The problem is that most projects now with the price of materials, they don't pencil. This is an old term for when people used to just do these spreadsheets with pencils. They don't pencil. That is, you end up negative. And if you, much less being able to pay all my equity partners 10% or 11% or whatever, they just don't pencil, which means that when I go into a room with equity people, like you guys, you're there, you're all investors, I can't show you a return because you want to see the spreadsheets. And not only that, you know the market, you know what, you look at the spreadsheets, you're not dumb. It's not rocket science. You look at it and you say, no way. So I have to show that it pencils out before I'll get anyone to invest. And the problem is all my expenses include things like property taxes, infrastructure. So what these guys are talking about, Hula, is they're looking around for ways to either, well, they'll do everything they can to gap capital investors, but they're not going to get anybody unless they can show a reasonable return. So what they're really doing is looking to take out of their spreadsheet pieces of cost. If they can take out, for example, property taxes, I'm not going to pay property taxes because there's a tax abatement. They'll just take it out, makes it easier. Or if they, if there's a tax increment financing district, they know that they're going to be able to sell bonds right up in the start and sell those bonds to pay for infrastructure that they would otherwise have to load onto their spreadsheet. And they can't, they take it off. So when these guys say they want a project specific tip, what they're really saying is that would allow me to take $60 million off the expenses of this project and see what happens. Does it pencil? So what does this mean for affordable housing? Well, whatever affordable housing you pay has to, it's just the cost of the affordable housing, either in the amount of rent between the market rent and the affordable rent. That's an expense. It's just it's like any other, it's like bricks. It's just another expense. It goes into the spreadsheet. If there's money to support the affordable housing, like tax credit, we've heard about 2 tax credit programs, that money, great. It just goes in as income or it, in my spreadsheet. It's just all very simple. It's math. It's just simple math. So what does that mean for affordable housing? I think developers like this, and really a lot of developers now in the United States have come to understand that mixed use housing, where you have affordable housing mixed with market rate, really works. It used to be like 30 years ago. I can tell you, I used to go to ULI, Urban Land Institute conferences, and people would present, and there was just terrible trouble getting any bank to look at a project that had affordable housing in it. Now, the idea of mixed use, stay away from me, I'm not interested. Now that's really changed. So I think, Elizabeth, for example, the answer to your question, like how much would you build? I think it used to be as little as I can. I don't think that's the case now with a lot of developers. It's true with some, but not a lot. And particularly people like these guys, they'll build what they can build. Now, I didn't ask them the question I'd like to. Is there an upper limit? Would you build a project that's 50% if you could afford it? I didn't ask them. I'd like to know, but I suspect their answer would be yes, we would, because we've done it in New York where there's so much money to support it and it works fine, but I don't know. I suppose there are people who would tell you, and now I'm beyond my expertise, that it's good to have a mix of people. that you don't want all low income in one building. Or it's good to have a mix of ownership and rental in one building, that really works well. It used to be you couldn't get financing. Financing, so much of what we don't like was a product of just who would invest and what their financing requirements would be. And the banks were so conservative. I mean, they had like a list of 20 things that they would finance. If you weren't on the list, you wouldn't even get in the front door. And mixed income wasn't on the list. Even 20 years ago, mixed use, like in San Francisco now, people are building high rises that are have in one building, like the first 20 floors are office. The next 20 floors are condominium or, rental units. The next 10 floors are condominiums. And in the middle, there's a gym. And on the bottom floor, there's a supermarket. It's all in one building. You couldn't get that finance. You just couldn't get anybody who was interested in mixed use 25 years ago. It just couldn't do it. A lot of banks would do things like say, it's called a floor to ceiling loan. They would say, sure, I'll lend you money, Mark. Once you've shown me you've got 80% of your building, it's not built yet, 80% of it pre-leased. I want to see the leases for 80% of it. Well, who will rent space in a building when they haven't seen it? Just because I show them pretty pictures, I'll tell you who. It's the people that when you go into your standard, slightly upper end shopping center, it's not your local kitchen store. It's it's Williams Sonoma. It's not your local food, butcher. It's some national. It's the big chains that will go into shopping centers because there's a pre-leasing requirement and they'll do it, whereas mon pods won't. So a lot of what you think is a land use decision isn't. It's a money decision because you can't get loans. So anyway, I'm sorry to take your time, but that's kind of so I think the answer to Elizabeth's question is these guys will build what they can and will be lucky if they can build it all. Really, it's going to be an uphill battle for them, not just 20%. I think it'd be an uphill battle to sell market rate units. Yes.
Thank you for that. I think I observed about 20% affordable of that. No, I'm just kidding. I remember that we got testimony from BHFA from Maura Collins at one point saying mixed use doesn't make the affordable housing units more affordable. It actually makes the market rate units more expensive. So incorporating all of the requirements involved in building affordable housing with whatever subsidies are made available, you have to meet so many standards that it actually makes the market rate units more expensive overall, overall.
Well, look, here's a good way to explain that. Let's create a hypothetical development. It's not subject to any requirements except one. I have to have 20% of my units have to be affordable. Okay, that's it. That's the only requirement. I can build them in the middle of a field that's prime agricultural land with nothing but driveways. Yeah. Or no, not a brownfield, nothing. Okay, it's the cheapest possible location. As a developer, I will include as one of my costs the difference between the market rate and the subsidized rate for those 20% of those units. And I'll just include it in there. And I'll have to charge rents for the market rates that pays for the subsidy. So the market rate units will subsidize the affordable units. There's no external source of money. You can't print money. It just has to come from somewhere. And if it was an isolated development with no outside money and you built 20% affordable, the other units would be paying the affordable. What Maura was testifying to is that they're doing more than that. There's other expensive things that they feel it's their mission to do. For example, they really want to build in brownfields areas. They really want to build in city centers because we have land use policies that says if we can, it'd be good to concentrate our units in town centers or city centers, and it's more expensive to build there. Remember how she talked about how it's difficult just to get your materials on the site and get the cranes on the site and get all of that on the site. That's what she's talking about. She's saying we're doing a lot more than just building mixed-use housing that's affordable. We're also building out, we have policies, and every one of those policies costs money. Every one of them. And you just have to figure it in to the pro forma. And that came in answer to a question of like, why are you so expensive? Because there are people who testified before us saying, I can build housing for like 400,000 or 300,000. And her answer was, well, yeah, in a green field, not in a brown field. Yeah, without, not without meeting all of these other needs. So it all goes into the spreadsheet.
Which is an odd way of choosing how to build affordable housing for people.
Inclusionary zoning.
When you
Is-
say like, we're gonna build the most expensive way and then subsidize it. Call it affordable,
The
opposed to building a less expensive.
less expensive and call it.
Less subsidized, because none of it's affordable, let's be honest, like. Saying that we're building $500,000 affordable rental units. is
No,
ridiculous.
well, it's not unless we subsidize
So,
300,000
it's
of it. Yeah,
Subsidized housing,
it's subsidized.
whether it's permanently subsidized, that we call permanently affordable. it's
Yes.
Either permanently subsidized.
Well, it's affordable because it's
Temporarily.
subsidized. I mean, they mean different
That's,
things.
you're right. It's only through, in our market now in Vermont, which is so unfortunate. And it's only gonna get worse. The only affordable housing is subsidized housing.
Kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, you can go to the
Except-
market and find
You can-
housing, single.
Yeah, well, you can
housing.
find built
It's
the older
way
housing.
cheaper.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, it's just, I watched some video. It was a good explanation. It was like 20 minutes long. I think last session or something that really spoke to me, stayed with me. But yeah, it's just a really odd way of like, we need housing for the people that don't have the resources and we're gonna build it at the most expensive way we possibly can. Then subsidize it so that they can afford it. When it's like, well, how about you just don't build it super expensively? Property in downtown Burlington, I'm sure that property is real cheap, that 13 acres,
Also just wanted to really very broadly point out that mixed use doesn't mean the same thing everywhere.
mixed income or mixed use?
Mixed use.
Well, mixed use, you mean as in like housing and commercial in one
Yep.
thing? Yeah. It
What are
used
you
to be,
saying? Like, what is that? So why is it, oh, sorry, what is that?
Because in the context of this morning, mixed use meant mixed income level.
right, mixed use,
Oh,
theirs
okay.
will be mixed use and that they will have commercial development on the site.
But the way that they were describing it was
They meant mixed income, not
meant
mixed.
mixed income and not
Yeah.
mixed use.
Yeah.
Oh, I heard.
There's
you
two
say
different
mixed income.
words there.
I didn't hear mixed use. I heard mixed income.
Yeah, it was mixed income, but first of all, they have hula on the existing hula on their site. But
Well, no,
But-
not across the,
Across the-
road.
it's
Yeah, yeah,
right
yeah.
there,
Yeah,
but-
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
what the most urban developers now who are thoughtful know is that what you want is, you don't want to build something that's empty at night. As in only office buildings. You don't want to build something that's empty in the day, as in housing units. You want to build something that's full all the time. And that means putting in office, housing, stores, all in the same place.
That's what mixed use means.
Yes,
Yeah, but also,
and it was really, I mean, when I first became involved with the Urban Land Institute, which is a great, interesting educational and organization, you couldn't get financing for mixed use. Much less green building, like, you gotta be kidding me.
Yeah, to Elizabeth's point, like could be rentals in business. It could be, you could be referring to it as just rentals in for sale homes. Like that's your mixed use. It could be for sale homes and business. Yeah, it's just kind of a catch-all term for doing different stuff.
But I think you've asked an interesting question, Joe, which I would like to hear Maura speak about sometime, which is, why are you spending public dollars building affordable housing in town centers where it's, you got to subsidize it more to get your units? I think that's an interesting question. I think I know some of the answers.
I think I know the answer too.
I mean, isn't that our whole, all of this, these programs are based on that, transportation and walkable downtowns and all that stuff is supposed to keep everything downtown. Whether that's the right thing to do or not, it's not the question, but it is what all that zoning stuff has been about.
Yeah, it's certainly been the direction of our state for sure. It's just,
Yeah.
I mean, you can't say that it's a bad thing that it's ridiculously expensive because that's the direction you're choosing to go.
Right.
You know, it's either do it and stop complaining or change course.
Well, actually, one of the reasons that I've been advocating a multi-tiered approach to infrastructure financing, that is TIFs, but also tax abatement and assessment districts and the bond bank, is that what works for Burlington and maybe even Rutland doesn't work for real rural Vermont. I mean, it's a different world. And a lot of the thinking that went behind compact development and all of that density, a lot of that thinking comes out of the new urbanist movement. And the there's no new ruralism. We haven't figured out the best way to make all of that happen in rural America, and it's not the same rules. And I would like to see us address both, not just one. I think if we're doing Vermont right, we have to help rural Vermont as well. I mean, it's easy to say, man, 1,100, 1,500 units in Burlington, that's never going to happen in the kingdom. So let's put all our money there, you know, in Burlington. But that's not who we are, my opinion.
We just had in my town a 5-year-long struggle for one property owner who bought I think 10 acres in the village zone. He wanted to put up 5 tiny houses next to the post office and spent 5 years trying to battle the town over it. What's that? Everybody, yeah. Ultimately he won, but you're the one who zoned it that way. I mean,
Like it was zoned for development.
yeah, I mean, it's a tiny town. So we have I mean, on a molecular scale of what we're talking about,
Yeah.
we zoned for the village area, which is supposed to be where you can have higher population density. Why did you zone it that way if you didn't want to have higher density there?
Yeah. I'll just share what's going on for, I don't know, the RPCs are like, they're kind of, their new rules or whatever they're doing, working on, like they're giving every town, like, here's what you're expected to build the next 10 years.
Yep.
That's your housing targets they're getting.
Do
And
they have does that have any teeth under current law?
I don't think it's enforceable, but it's kind of like, that's where and I mean, more, we keep giving RPCs more power over towns and then saying we want regional.
That's the thing.
governments. And then it's like, okay, well, they also are, the more of that you give them, the more carrot and stick they're able to do as No, actually, no, you don't qualify for that because you're not meeting your goals.
Mhm.
And that grant comes through us.
And even though
So-
it does not take into account things like the school closures that will be coming.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
the,
And I want to say Newberry's is at like 100 houses in the next 10 years. Number one, we tell Newberry not to build in this building. We tell us stop building because you're rural, beautiful farmland, Vermont. We're on track. Like if we just stick
Who
on
is saying
track,
not to
the
build
RP,
there?
Well, because
It's a
they
thing.
actually.
It's a whole. I'm saying like that you got a lot of farmland and a lot of, it's all rural. You don't have public water and sewer. So we're not necessarily saying don't build there, but we're saying we're not going to help you at all build there. And then like if we stick on the track that we're at, we're like, I don't know, high 20s is where we'll be in 10 years.
If that,
If that.
it's really gotta be an integrated process, and I think that some of that falls on us.
Yeah.
In other words, we have to look at a place like Newberry. I think that's actually a really good example. I think we have to look at a place like Newberry and ask ourselves, if we're gonna mandate the RPCs to help, what are we gonna mandate them? And if and we can't have these contradictory
Yeah, because that's how it feels.
contradictory policies. And I think that ultimately, although we don't control land use here, we're gonna have to find a way of working together to address that.
We also don't control taxation
Right.
yet.
Right.
We're in charge of housing, which requires land use and taxation reform.
Yeah, well, that's a conversation that I think is gonna happen more here.
Welcome to the housing committee. It's been these struggles for 5 years.
Which wall is mine for banging my head against?
Well, there's energy across the hall, there's infrastructure over there.
We had to
environment up
here.
there.
Yeah, who's building it? How you paying for it? And where's it going? And then we're like, you can work on a little bit of that.
I'll tell you what, we have an 11, I thank you for allowing me to put it on for a while, but I
That
think
was
it's
fun. Let's do that
okay
more
we
often.
have- I think we've heard a lot of stuff in here. It's okay to have conversations. I think, by the way, I just put a plug in. The Urban Land Institute is really a very interesting place to, or it's an interest, if you care about housing and you want to stay involved. The problem is it's expensive. I think the full cost, if you're a developer, say, of being in it is thousands of dollars. But for public officials, it's more like several $100s, but it's not like $20. And what you get is they have, at least this used to be the case, 2 conferences a week. I mean, a year. One conference is just everybody. And it's all their conferences are, you go into a room and the subject is mixed use development or low income housing or thinking future shopping centers, or, it's very specific. The members are public officials, private developers, everybody under the sun. And all you do, it's not a talking head panel thing, is you just listen to presentation after presentation of some project. How we did it, what happened to us, what did it cost, et cetera. The other is you get to belong to a subgroup, like I want to belong to green infrastructure, or I want to belong to shopping centers, or I want to belong to whatever. And these sections have their own conferences. And when you go, you meet the other 100 people in the country who are doing that development, and you sit around and talk with them. And then the presentations are all very specific about that development. And they're just amazing conferences. And they also have a monthly magazine, which is really good. And anyway, if this isn't a real interest of yours, talk to me and I'll tell you more about ULI. It's the best organization there is for people involved. Why don't we our next one is at 11:30, we're going to hear from Judith Dillon, remember, from the Labor Relations Board. Why don't we take a 15-minute break, go offline,